AP migration from Zone Director to SmartZone. Typically, this would be accomplished through the integrated SmartZone migration tool under Administration and ZD migration. It's a pretty simple tool. Basically, provide a IP address, username, and credentialing for the Zone Director. SmartZone connects and pulls AP information. I'll do a quick connection here to see what that'll look like. And again, my zone director is 10.1.1.207. I am 10.1.1.200. So we're on the same subnet. In this case, I have no firewall or any other filtering mechanisms in place between the two. What you'll typically see is that a couple scripts get uploaded, connects to and fetches the AP info, and then at that point, it freezes and basically asks you to select an access point. So in that case, we could come in, select the AP, and do some movement based off of the APs that we see here. So occasionally, this process may not work, typically due to some sort of filtering or other mechanisms in place, potentially even a software bug. So in that case, what we want to do is maybe look at alternative mechanisms to get access points from Zone Director into SmartZone. And so I want to cover that today with a couple of tools that were written by one of my Ruckus SEs over in Europe. And so what I will do is get started with that, hop over into Zone Director, and you can see that if I go to the Monitor tab, access points, we have 4 access points that are all connected online. I've given these fictional names, descriptions, GPS coordinates, all that good stuff. So to get started with the process, the first thing we want to do is take a snapshot of what currently exists. So what we'll do is take this monitor access points, we'll go and we'll export that data to a CSV. CSV is automatically given a name, so I'm going to save that off. It's going to show up in my downloads folder here on the computer. So let me grab that and hop back over to the current screen. So I hop over. And what we can see is we've got things like MAC address, name, description, location. I thought GPS coordinates came over in this, but it looks like it may not, so I may have to reproduce some of that. But again, we've got all the critical bits, at least MAC address, device name, description, and then location, if that information has been filled out, as well as model number and status. So what I'm going to do is keep this AP list as is. And one bit of information that I need is this IP address. And these are the APs that I want to move. And so if you've got, I've only got 4 in this case, which is a relatively small list, but if you had 100 or 500 or 1,000, you might want to kind of filter on device name, and then hopefully you've got a name by building or by floor, and then kind of move things sequentially in a way that it makes sense. So what I will do is I will go ahead and grab these 4 IP addresses and then open up the tool. And the first tool I have is a tool that actually helps move between platforms. And that'll go from standalone to Unleashed to Zone Director to SmartZone. And we've got the ability to kind of bounce around. And so here what I can do is I can actually load a CSV file, or I can click for a template. I've actually already clicked for that template. So hopefully that is here somewhere. And the template is very basic. All it really needs is a single column of IP addresses. So I'm going to copy those, save this, and this should be in my downloads folder again. And let's see if this works. So we'll go into import CSV, downloads, and here's my template. Okay, so I got my IP addresses. And so what I'll do is actually make sure that these APs are all reachable, and I'm going to use the username and password information that are currently in Zone Director. And this is typically the admin password to actually log into Zone Director. So 1 second while I pull that again. And I'll kind of do this in a couple stages. You see we've got a bunch of checkboxes here. So got a password generated password that does show up in plain text here. just keep that in mind if you're working with others. And we'll hit go. We'll just make sure that it can log into the APs. It's also going to try the super SP admin, which is the default, just in case you have any defaulted access points out there. So click go, and we'll see what we get. So this is pretty nice. It's actually going to give us a list of MAC address, models, the current firmware, ping time, and then result. And so the result here is pretty basic. We finished up, we're done. There's not a whole lot that nothing really we've specified yet. So what I want to do is these are the APs I want to move. And I've got this additional information. Again, device name, description, location. This information is not necessarily going to come over in this tool. This tool is really meant to get the APs running a particular version of firmware and then also factory defaulted. And so what's going to happen is once they're running the standalone firmware, and I'm going to actually set this up via TFTP. Once they're running the standalone firmware, they'll actually look through the normal discovery mechanism. So DHCP, option 43, or DNS for Ruckus controller. And I have 10.1.23, 10.1.20.3. No username and password to worry about. And it's actually going to look at, we basically have a model number variable here. So that'll be either R510 or H510 in my case, pulled from here. And then the actual firmware. And I believe that the firmware I have loaded is a 104, but it's 000. Look at my TFTP server here. TFTP 1347 is actually what I'm running. So 1347. So again, model number underscore and then the standalone firmware version. This is a reasonably recent version of code, I think from October of 2018. This will work fine to get us where we need to be. The other things I want to do is I want to actually go ahead and have the APs reset to factory defaults, and then I want to reboot the AP. I can run this AP CLI command, but that kind of runs into issues with the factory defaults because that'll actually clear out any of the CLI commands that we would run. So what we'll do is we'll give this a shot. TFTP server should be up and running. File names hopefully are correct. We'll actually see that here if they're not. And I will go ahead and click go. And let's see what we get. Okay, so again, the result here is done. Not especially descriptive here, but one thing that we can do is look and see, okay, that we have a firmware update, and the firmware update is in progress. What you would see here is if you had a incorrect file name or directory specified, you would actually see that error out and fail. The other thing you're going to see from the actual access points is that within, I don't know, 10 or 15 seconds, they're actually going to go red and reboot, and again, they should come back up in a factory default setting. So what we can actually do, I've got a couple things going here at once, but I have in my DHCP pool for this particular VLAN, I've actually set up an option 43. So basically this is an identifier for us. 06 tells it that it's SmartZone, OA is the length, and then basically I'm pointing it to 10.1.1.200. And so again, this is going to give it the reachability information for SmartZone. So what should happen with the APs when they come back up is they should see this option via DHCP, reach out to SmartZone and ask, hey, can we join the SmartZone? At the same time, we should start to see the APs disconnect from Zone Director as they move from, again, this platform into a default state, and then from a default state over into SmartZone. And so again, what we can do in SmartZone is typically the first place you see any indication that something is happening is that in the Events tab, we'll actually start to see that APs are reaching out to the SmartZone and asking for information about what to do next. And so here we go. We've got a couple of APs, 1, 2, 3, 4, right, connected. And what we'll actually see is that these APs will connect. They'll provide some information up to SmartZone, and then we'll be told that, hey, you're running a standalone image. Let's go ahead and get you updated to the correct version of SmartZone code. Not aware of a way to load that code directly. I think we have to go back to the standalone, just the way that things are bundled. And so again, as we watch this will probably take anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. And what will happen is the APs will reboot once or possibly twice, depending on the configuration. But we'll actually see that each of them will have a firmware is being updated. That 104 000 1347 is what we pushed from the dog tag tool, crossbreeder tool, and then the 5100 595 is the firmware associated with this version of SmartZone. So at this point, we're good as far as getting the APs from one control mechanism to another, other than just waiting the time for these guys to come up. And so we see we've got firmware updates happening here, here, and here. We've got a couple that are rebooting already, just kind of looking at my status lights. What I'll do is actually head over to the Access Point tab. And we'll have to hang here for a couple of minutes, but you see one of the immediate problems is that the APs, because they came in a factory default state, all come in with this particularly non-descriptive name of Ruckus AP. So this is going to be the part that we correct. Once all the APs are fully rebooted, connected to SmartZone, and reachable, we'll see IP address information here. We'll start to see traffic information if we have anything configured. But once that becomes available, we'll actually better run the second script, this Ruckus dog tag tool, to actually push the rest of the information, including name, description, all that other good stuff, into SmartZone. So that is another CSV file, and most of that comes directly from the push that we did earlier from Zone Director. I think we only have to make one or two changes. So if I actually go back and look at that information, we've got MAC address, device name, description. So if I remember correctly, the way this works is we want to pull everything from here to here, right? We don't care about model information, status, mesh mode, IP address. That may all change under SmartZone. So we'll clear that out. And again, this is my Ruckus AP list, _38, just those last two digits so I can keep up with it. Save this. Push that down. Let's go back and check SmartZone. And then also while we're doing that, okay, those APs are still coming back up. Yeah, still see some status lights. While we're doing that, we'll go ahead and double check our connectivity for our dog tag application. There's two versions of this. There's one for kind of SmartZone version 5 and above, and then one for version 3. So in this case, I happen to be version 5. They really look the same. It's just a different set of API calls. And so that's the reason for the difference. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and grab that password again. Drop that in here. Make sure we can connect. And so everything I'm going to push is going to be in the default zone because that's where these APs are landing. But if you had additional zones configured, you could go through and do a mass edit from here. But you can see here that we've got the green status light. So we are good to go. And again, at this point, it's more or less just waiting for the APs to come up. While we're waiting, I'll go ahead and pull in that CSV, make sure the formatting is good. MAC address, name, description, and location. Again, we didn't have the latitude and longitude information, the static channel widths and channels. Those are not going to come over, but this is a way to set that in mass very quickly. But again, what we'll do is we'll actually just hang out here. Again, this all looks good, and wait for the APs to fully rejoin or join SmartZone. And so again, we've got updated firmware. And again, these guys are, I think, coming up for from their last reboot. So we should be here within a minute or two of having this done. And the last bit that you'll see is that we've got firmware updates happening. And then once things are actually kind of fully into SmartZone and correct, you'll actually see that the configuration has been updated for these APs. And again, this is probably a 5 to 10 minute process total to make this happen. And again, I've got two different models here. I've got 3 H510s, so these are all the wall mount APs, and then I have an R510. And then the reboot time is slightly different on these guys, but pretty close. Okay, so I'm seeing some control lights flashing now, so hopefully Firmware updates. Memory thresholds we're not worried about. That's from some other switch monitoring. And we're starting to see some of the APs. Actually, this is BE90 being updated to a new configuration. And so again, we're getting pretty close to having everybody back up and running. So looking at, let's see, BE90, no, it's like my R510. So let's see if that's actually showing as fully connected. Yeah, BE90. Okay, still looking at my control light. Let's see if we got any updates here. Okay, 2460, and then I should also have a 22B0 showing up here in a second. And 22B0, rebooting one last time. One thing that I also say is, looks like maybe some of the AP information came through from the first time I ran through this tool. So we'll see if this updates. If it doesn't, what we'll do is we'll go back into the naming tool, update these names just to show how it goes out and pushes everything for you automatically. So we'll give this a second to do its thing. Everybody appears online. I'm looking at my status lights, and the control is solid for all but one of my APs, which is the 22B0. So he's still working on something, probably pushing that last config out. Okay, and now I have a solid control light on the last LED, and that's a 22B0, so we'll see if, I think it's going to update here in a moment. Okay, configuration is updated. And at this point, I expect that hallway name to clear out, but what we'll do just to make sure this is unique and the tool's actually doing its job is we will grab the template we were working off of. Grab that, that was the 38. Okay. And again, just to keep this fair, I'll call this new name. We'll do that for each of these APs. Save that, and what we'll do is after we go through and rename these, we'll look for that new name prefix. So let's see. Okay, so they're all back in a fully defaulted online status, all renamed Ruckus AP. Again, with no, if I look at one of these guys, no description, no location information, any of that good stuff. So again, we'll run through the dog tag tool. We re-import our CSV. So we'll have that new prefix, new name. Again, still connected to SmartZone and the default zone. These are my APs. You can go through and check these MAC addresses if you like. Description, location, and again, the latitude and longitude, if we had those, we could throw them in the Excel file. We just didn't get those from Zone Director. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and click Go, and we'll get some status here. Hopefully at the end with the result. And here we go. These all look okay, meaning that typically it was able to push this, this, and this, so the name, description, and location information. What that results in from a SmartZone perspective is that we'd make an API call from the dog tag tool into SmartZone. SmartZone then reaches out to all of the appropriate access points to push that new information. And so again, this will take a minute or two, and we'll see that the configurations are going to get updated for each of those APs. So it looks like AP, and we've got the new name, and so it looks like that may have already pushed. So if we go back into the access points, give this a minute to update, we'll see that essentially those changes push out to the AP confirms everything, and then talks back to SmartZone and says, hey, we're looking good. So we've got a couple that have updated already, basement, second floor, and we'll give these other two just a minute. But that's essentially what we want to do. We want to go through and, again, use the crossbreeder and the dog tag tool to get us from Zone Director into a default state, use the default state to point towards SmartZone, and then use the dog tag tool to actually go through and name and provide some additional information for SmartZone to use to make this a little more usable. And then at this point, you would normally go through, perhaps create a new either access point group or another zone. And so maybe this would be your, let's see, I'll create a group, create a zone, call this campus, location. Let's see, we do have to define a login and a password here. And this can be anything that you like. I'll go ahead and use the admin login again, just in case we need to hit these APs in the future. Click OK. And so this is my campus with its default zone. And so I would take these and within the campus maybe define a new building. Library, make that an AP group. And then I would go ahead and move the APs as appropriate. So we'll just assume that maybe, I don't know, maybe all these live in the library. So I select them all, do a move, and push them to the library. And at this point, you would go ahead and define any WLANs, any policies, any control mechanisms that might be associated with the access points. But again, this is just a way to group things. So again, everything that we just converted, we'll assume this was all one building. It was the library, and we had coverage for the hallway, a basement, main floor, and a second floor. So hope this was helpful. Just let me know if not, and we will do what we need to from there. Thank you very much. Have a good day.